These brands never discounted, not during recessions, not during pandemics, not when the rest of fashion collapsed. Their power came from one rule: prices never moved, but something has cracked. Quiet private sales became outlet expansions, then open price cuts. The same houses that swore they would never budge are now discounting just to move stock. This is not generosity, it is a warning. The richest buyers walked away, and when they leave, status collapses for everyone else. Today, we count down 10 luxury brands forced to discount for the first time ever. And by the final brand, you will understand why this shift changes luxury permanently. Number 10. Burberry. For decades, Burberry was the very definition of restrained British luxury. The check pattern, the trench coat, the quiet confidence. It was heritage bottled in fashion, and it did not need to scream for attention. But lately, the screaming has gotten louder, and it is coming from the wrong direction. In 2024, Burberry reported an operating loss of £53 million in the first half alone. Revenue plunged by 20%. Comparable store sales collapsed. And in a move that would have been unthinkable a decade ago, the brand began discounting aggressively, not just through outlets, but directly through third-party retailers, with price cuts reaching up to 50%. What went wrong? It started with overexposure. Burberry leaned heavily into wholesale, flooding the market with product in an attempt to stay relevant. But in luxury, availability kills mystique. When that iconic check became commonplace on discount racks and outlet floors, the brand's core customer, the ones paying full price, quietly moved on. Analysts warned that every discount steered the brand closer to collapse. Luxury research at Pepperdine called it a point of no return, where pricing volatility erodes brand equity so badly that recovery becomes nearly impossible. Even with a new strategy called Burberry Forward, launched late last year, focused on reconnecting with heritage, the numbers have not stabilized. Sales in America and Asia continue to fall. Wholesale revenue is expected to decline another 35%. And market watchers are asking a question that would have been unthinkable a few years ago. Is Burberry even luxury anymore? It is still beautiful. It is still well made. But the wealthy buyer no longer sees it as rare, and in this market, safe is just another word for forgettable. Burberry got caught between two identities, and now it is paying the price. But while Burberry lost its mystique through overexposure, the next brand on this list proves that heritage alone is no longer enough to survive. Number 9. Salvatore Ferragamo. Ferragamo was never loud. It did not chase trends or seek influencer validation. For nearly a century, it built its name on quiet sophistication, on Italian craftsmanship that spoke for itself. When you bought Ferragamo, you were buying legacy, not hype. But legacy does not pay the bills when foot traffic dries up. In 2024, Ferragamo saw its full-year revenue drop by 10.5% to just over €1 billion. In the first quarter of 2025, sales slipped again, down another 2.5%. Asia-Pacific, once a reliable growth market, dropped 13%. Wholesale collapsed by more than 21% in a single year. And, for a brand that once kept its distance from discount culture, the shift has been unmistakable. Flash sales, outlet availability, and steep markdowns through authorized third-party retailers are no longer rare exceptions. They are the new normal. The problem is simple: Ferragamo stopped evolving. While competitors like Bottega Veneta and Loewe redefined modern craftsmanship with bold shapes and unexpected textures, Ferragamo stayed polished, predictable, and safe. Its handbags still reflect impeccable quality. Its shoes still carry a pedigree. But for younger, wealthy buyers seeking freshness, Ferragamo feels like yesterday's elegance. The departure of CEO Marco Gobbetti earlier this year only added to the uncertainty. The brand is now searching for leadership, trying to hold margins steady while consumer confidence wavers. Ferragamo faded by standing still. The next brand made the opposite mistake, betting everything on volume and spectacle, and discovering how fast noise turns into exhaustion. Number 8. Versace never whispered. The gold chains, the Medusa logo, the Baroque maximalism. It was designed to command every room. And for years, that excess worked perfectly. Versace was not just fashion, it was attitude. But in a market now craving subtlety, all that shine started to feel like yesterday's party. In fiscal 2025, Versace's revenue dropped by 15% in a single quarter. Sales in the Americas fell by 21%. Asia declined by 11%. And parent company Capri Holdings, already staggered from struggles at Michael Kors and Jimmy Choo, quietly confirmed what the industry had whispered for months. Versace was drowning. The discounting followed. While end-of-season sales on apparel and footwear still start at 50%, the second markdown, once set at 70%, has now been pulled back to 60%. Handbags at full-price boutiques are no longer put on sale, part of a belated attempt to restore scarcity. But the damage has already spread through outlets and third-party channels. Capri's CEO admitted the brand made two key mistakes: leaning too hard into the quiet luxury trend, which did not match Versace's DNA, and failing to balance that shift with products the aspirational customer actually wanted. In April 2025, Prada Group agreed to acquire Versace for $1.4 billion, a lifeline that signals both hope and humility. But even under new ownership, the task is enormous. Versace was built on being loud, bold, and untouchable. Now it must prove it can be relevant again in a world that has grown tired of shouting. Versace always knew what it was. The next brand never quite did, and in luxury, uncertainty is fatal. Number 7. Hugo Boss. Hugo Boss spent years in the uncomfortable middle, priced too high to be accessible, but never quite elite enough to be untouchable. For the aspirational professional, it was the suit you bought when you wanted to feel like you had made it. But in a luxury market that has split down the middle, that middle ground became a trap. In 2024, the brand cut its forecast twice. Annual sales came in at 4.3 billion euros, a modest 3% increase from the year before, but operating profit dropped 12% to 361 million euros. And in early 2025, sales began declining again, down 2% in the first quarter, pulled lower by weak demand in the United States and China. The company now expects flat to slightly negative growth for the year ahead, a grim forecast for a brand that once promised bold expansion. What followed was unavoidable. Widespread discounts and promotions, driven less by strategy and more by survival. Hugo Boss openly acknowledged that consumers now expect markdowns, and the brand has had to comply even as inventory levels dropped. Gross margins slipped to 60%, dragged down by freight costs and relentless promotional activity. And while the company talks of rebuilding with selective price increases and a tighter retail network, the reality is clear. Hugo Boss no longer commands the room the way it once did. The wealthy buyer, drawn to brands that require no explanation, has quietly moved upmarket. And the middle-class buyer, squeezed by inflation, is now looking elsewhere. Hugo Boss is stuck between identities. The next brand soared higher than almost anyone and fell harder for it. Number 6. Balmain. There was a time when Balmain felt untouchable. Under Olivier Rousteing, the house became a social media phenomenon, dressing Beyoncé, Kim Kardashian, and virtually every celebrity who wanted to signal arrival. The bold shoulders, the embellished jackets, the unmistakable glamour. Balmain was not just fashion, it was performance. But when the performance ends, what remains? Balmain grew from roughly $34 million in annual revenue before the Mayhoola acquisition in 2016 to more than $344 million today. But those numbers came with a cost. The brand leaned heavily on hype-driven product cycles, celebrity endorsements, and global runway tours, a strategy that worked brilliantly in the influencer era, but has started to feel exhausting in a market craving restraint. In November 2025, Roosting announced his departure after 14 years at the helm. Owner Mehula is now at a crossroads, facing a market where Loud no longer sells the way it used to, and where investors are asking whether Balmain can survive without its star designer. Meanwhile, discounting has quietly crept in. Sales sections now feature everything from biker jeans to statement outerwear. Third-party retailers list pieces at significant markdowns. The scarcity that once made Balmain covetable has softened, replaced by volume that the wealthy buyer sees as a warning sign. Mehula has signaled it may consider a sale. Kering, already connected through its stake in Valentino, remains a potential partner. But whether the brand ends up under new ownership or attempts a reinvention from within, the challenge is the same. Balmain must learn how to whisper. Because in today's luxury market, silence is more expensive than noise. And if Balmain's fall came from burning too bright, the next brand on our list collapsed from a fire that burned even larger and even faster. Subscribe if you want more videos exposing what the luxury industry never says out loud. Number 5. Gucci. If Balmain's decline felt unexpected, Gucci's has been seismic. This was not a niche house clinging to relevance. This was Kering's crown jewel, a brand that once generated half the group's profit and more hype than almost any name in fashion. And then everything unraveled. In 2024, Gucci's revenue dropped 23% year over year. In the first quarter of 2025, sales fell another 25%, with the wholesale channel collapsing by over 40%. Operating profit plunged 51%. Store closures accelerated, traffic vanished, and a brand that once symbolized the arrival of taste began to symbolize something else entirely: overexposure. Gucci's problems did not arrive overnight. The brand flooded the market with logo-heavy product during its peak years, leaning into maximalism and trend chasing at a pace that overwhelmed its core identity. When fashion shifted toward quiet luxury, Gucci had no anchor. It had trained customers to expect spectacle, and when spectacle lost its appeal, those customers stopped showing up. The company tried to pivot. Creative director Sabato De Sarno brought a cleaner aesthetic. But after just 2 years, he was out. Now Demna, formerly of Balenciaga, is set to take over, a move that signals desperation as much as reinvention. And the discounting, it is everywhere. Resale sites are stacked with Gucci bags at half price or less. Third-party retailers are offering markdowns that would have been unthinkable a few years ago. The double G, once a signal of status, is now a reminder of how quickly desire can fade. Gucci still has fans. It still has recognition. But the ultra-wealthy, the ones who buy to signal exclusivity, have already moved on. And in luxury, once that customer walks, getting them back is nearly impossible. Gucci collapsed under too much attention. The next brand tried the opposite, believing restraint would protect it, and discovered that even elegance has limits. Number 4. Valentino. Valentino was supposed to be insulated. This was not a trend-chasing brand. It was couture. It was legacy. It was the house of Pierpaolo Piccioli, the designer who built a reputation for emotional, cinematic fashion that transcended seasons. And yet, even Valentino could not escape the slowdown. In 2024, the brand posted a 3% revenue decline to 1.31 billion euros. Operating profit collapsed by 22%. While direct retail grew modestly, the wholesale channel shrank by roughly 20%, as Valentino pulled back from third-party partners in pursuit of greater exclusivity. The company described it as a strategy. Critics called it retreat. Valentino had always prided itself on staying above the discount game, but in the current environment, even that discipline has started to crack. Sale sections have quietly expanded. Authorized retailers now offer markdowns. And for a brand that built its identity on uncompromising elegance, those cracks are visible. The arrival of Alessandro Michele, formerly of Gucci, was meant to inject new energy. His maximalist, archival aesthetic is already reshaping collections. But Michele inherits a brand that must balance creative reinvention with financial recovery, all while navigating a market where couture prestige no longer translates into consistent demand. Kering now owns 30% of Valentino, with an option to acquire full control by 2028. That partnership will determine whether the brand can stabilize, or whether it becomes the next luxury name lost in transition. Valentino stayed steady. The next brand changed so often that even loyal customers stopped recognizing it. Number 3. Givenchy was once shorthand for a certain kind of elegance. The house of Audrey Hepburn, the little black dress, the quiet sophistication that defined mid-century luxury. But in the years since, that identity has been rewritten so many times that no one is quite sure what Givenchy means anymore. Since Riccardo Tisci departed in 2017, the brand has cycled through creative directors at a pace that borders on chaotic. Claire Waite-Keller came and went. Matthew Williams lasted 3 years before exiting at the end of 2023. For much of 2024, the house relied on its studio team, with no clear creative vision at the helm. Sarah Burton, formerly of Alexander McQueen, finally took over in late 2024. Her debut collection in March 2025 was praised for reinterpreting the brand's heritage. But by then, the damage was done. Givenchy had spent years drifting between aesthetics, leaving loyal customers confused and new buyers uninterested. LVMH does not break out individual brand financials, but industry analysts consistently point to Givenchy as one of the group's weakest performers, lagging behind Celine, Loewe, and even smaller labels within the portfolio. And while public discounts remain controlled, inventory has quietly moved through off-price channels and third-party clearance. The perception of exclusivity has softened. What once felt like effortless elegance now feels uncertain. Givenchy still has name recognition. It still carries heritage. But heritage without identity is just a museum piece, admired from a distance, but never purchased. Whether Burton can rebuild that identity remains the open question. And if Givenchy's fall came from creative chaos, the next brand on our list seemed to have everything in place, only to discover that even strong foundations cannot hold forever. Number 2. Saint Laurent. Saint Laurent was supposed to be untouchable. Under Anthony Vaccarello, the brand had carved out a distinct identity. Dark, sensual, effortlessly cool. It was not chasing trends. It was setting them. For years, that formula worked. And then it stopped. In 2024, Saint Laurent's revenue fell 9% to 2.88 billion euros. Operating profit dropped 39%. Wholesale revenue collapsed by 25%. And in the fourth quarter alone, it plunged 35% as the brand pushed harder toward direct-to-consumer distribution. The strategy was deliberate. Saint Laurent has been pulling back from third-party retail in pursuit of exclusivity, tightening supply to protect the brand's image. But the timing was brutal. With demand softening and consumer confidence weakening, that pullback left revenue gaps the brand could not fill. By early 2025, even Saint Laurent had started showing up in places it once avoided: private sales to select clients, expanded markdowns through authorized partners, a presence on off-price platforms that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Kering appointed a new CEO in late 2024, hoping to stabilize the ship. But with Gucci in free fall and the broader group under immense pressure, Saint Laurent cannot afford a long runway. It must prove it can balance exclusivity with volume, cool with commerce. The brand still resonates, the aesthetic still has fans. But the wealthy customer who once bought without hesitation is now pausing, calculating, waiting. And in luxury, hesitation is the first sign of trouble. But if Saint Laurent shows cracks in a foundation that once seemed solid, the top spot on this list reveals something even more startling: A brand that never discounted, never bent, never compromised, quietly adjusting in ways the world was never supposed to see. Number 1. Louis Vuitton. Adjacent lines and private sales. Louis Vuitton does not go on sale. The brand has repeated this for decades, building an empire on the idea that its prices are sacred, its value permanent, its mystique untouchable. There are no outlets, no Black Friday deals, no markdowns. At least, not publicly. But something has shifted. While Louis Vuitton itself remains officially pristine, the edges have started to soften. Through 24S, an LVMH-owned platform, discontinued Louis Vuitton items now appear at discounted prices. Private client sales, once rare, have reportedly expanded. Select department stores have been known to quietly reduce prices on older stock. None of this is announced, none of it is advertised. But the signals are there, and in a market where perception is everything, signals matter. LVMH's fashion and leather goods division, home to Louis Vuitton, saw sales drop 9% in the first half of 2025. First quarter revenue fell 5% when analysts had predicted a slight dip. The stock dropped nearly 8% in a single session, briefly losing its title as the world's most valuable luxury company to Hermès. The wealthiest customers, the ones who buy without waiting, are showing signs of fatigue. Price hikes since 2019 have pushed the cost of iconic bags up by as much as 100%. The Louis Vuitton Speedy, once a gateway to luxury, now sits firmly in the thousands. And for many affluent shoppers, the math no longer works. This is not collapse. Louis Vuitton remains enormously profitable, culturally dominant, and globally recognized. But when the most protected house in luxury begins to adjust, even indirectly, it signals something larger. The rules that once governed this industry are changing. The richest buyers are not chasing logos anymore. They want rarity, discretion, and meaning. They want brands that require explanation, not recognition. And Louis Vuitton, for all its power, is now competing for attention it once commanded effortlessly. Because here is the truth, luxury is not about price, it is about perception. And when the people who can afford anything stop wanting what you sell, discounts are not a solution, they are an admission.